Thank you for coming. I would like to give you the details of the operation that we had nitong nakaraang December 1. What prompted the Commandant, Admiral Ronnie Hilgaban, to deploy 4411 or BRP Cape Engaño, and of course, one of the largest vessels ng Coast Guard is BRP Melchora Aquino or BRP MRB 9702, is the report of the fisherman na bumalik sa Quezon, Palawan noong November 28. At ibinigay niya sa amin ang copy ng video kung saan a PLA Navy helicopter with tail number 65 ay nakita nyo naman sa video, hinaharas ang ating mga mangingisdang Pilipino sa Rozul Reef. He also provided photos showing the PLA Navy helicopter hovering at a very low level of flight, no? Na kung saan nahaharas sa mga mangingisdang Pilipino. Because of that, the Commandant, Admiral Gavan, has decided to deploy our two Coast Guard vessels to ensure the safety and security of our Filipino fishermen. It was on November 30 that the Philippine Coast Guard vessels departed Buliluyan Port in Puerto Princesa. At on our way from Buliluyan to Rozul Reef, we experienced dangerous maneuver on the part of the Chinese Coast Guard vessel 5203 around 8 p.m. and 10 p.m. nung gabi ng November 30 when we passed through the vicinity of Escoda Shoal. When we arrived at the vicinity of Rozul Reef, aming nasaksihan dito ang presensya ng 18 Filipino fishing boats with an estimated number of more than 100 Filipino fishermen na crew na itong mga bangka na ito. At the same time, there were two China Coast Guard vessels within the immediate vicinity ng Rozul Reef. This is China Coast Guard 5203 and 5205. During the interview conducted by some of the media personalities who were embedded in this particular mission, na i-share ng ating mga mangingisdang Pilipino na originally there were 20 Filipino fishing boats na pumunta sa Rozul Reef. And unfortunately, dahil sa malakas na alon, hinampas-hampas ang dalawang fishing boat na kasama nila na naging dahilan kung bakit ito na sumadsad sa mababaw na area, no, sa Rozul Reef. And it is only through the help of the other Filipino fishermen kung bakit nakasurvive at nakuha nila ang mga gamit ng mga dalawang boats na to na lumubog, no? Accordingly, ang paglubog nitong dalawang boats na to ay nangyari noong November 30, a day before the arrival of the Philippine Coast Guard, dahil December 1 kami dumating. It was also shared by the Filipino fishermen na despite of the presence of the two China Coast Guard vessels, at nakita sila, no, witnessing itong paglubog ng dalawang Filipino fishing boats, ay hindi sila tinulungan ng China Coast Guard vessel. And surprisingly, on December 1, no, ng around 12 noon, when we were about to leave Rozul Reef ng Cape Engaño ng 4411, nakatanggap ng radio call ang ating 9702. Ironically, the Chinese Coast Guard vessel 5205 is offering the Philippine Coast Guard for assistance para daw matulungan ang ating mga mangingisdang lumubog. Again, I don't know how they want to play this script, no? Kasi ang paglubog ay nangyari noong November 30. Ang offer nila sa Coast Guard, which is tingin ko they intentionally recorded the offer, is December 1. Ibig sabihin, they just want to appear na they are extending assistance, but as what the fishermen said, no, not a single attempt on the part of the Chinese Coast Guard was extended to rescue our fishermen. And then December 2, ngayong araw, dumating ang MRRB 4411 or BRP Cape Engaño sa Buliluyan Port. Dala-dala ang mga media friends natin na nakasaksi sa insidente at operasyon na to noong December 1. But for BRP Melchora Aquino, MRRB 9702, ito ay nananatiling nagpapatrolya at gumagabay sa ating mga mangingisda sa Rozul Reef. It is estimated that a total of 6 tons of fish catches ang i-total natin na itinanong natin sa lahat ng mga mangingisda dito. In short, this is almost 5,400 kilos of fish ang nahuli ng ating mga kababayang Pilipino dito sa Rozul Reef. Thank you. If you have questions, please.
Sir, going back on the incident, the Chinese Navy helicopter, can you give us a picture lang kung ano yung pinaka-close na distance ng helicopter doon sa mga fishing boats and ano yung possible danger nito doon sa mga kababayan natin knowing that these fishing boats are made of light materials?
Well, according sa video na ipinakita, it is estimated na the distance is only around 15 to 18 feet yung taas ng lipad ng helicopter mula dun sa bubong ng ating mga light material na bangka. So you can just imagine na ang ating mga mangingisdang Pilipino ay nahihirapan na sa lalaki ng alon sa West Philippine Sea. Meron ka pang chopper na meron namang force na ipinupush ka pababa. So that's very dangerous. But luckily, wala namang mangingisdang Pilipino na na-aksidente dahil sa ginagawang harassment ng China noong November 27.
Last question for now, sir, from my end. Gaano katagal yung harassment ng Chinese Navy helicopter doon sa mga fishing boats?
Well, according to the Filipino fishermen, ang ginawa talaga nila is pinuntahan nila yung small grouping ng mga mangingisda. So let's say out of the 20 Filipino fishing boats, merong 4 to 5 grouping ng mga Filipino fishing boats. So nag-hover siya in all these groupings na tumatagal ng 5 to 10 minutes.
Sir, good afternoon po. Silvina from MHK. Since you have already answered na there were around 20 fishing boats in the area when the incident happened, may we know if there were true challenges from the chopper to the fishermen there?
Well, according to the Filipino fishermen, it's not just the chopper, the China Coast Guard vessels na nandoon sa vicinity has been challenging ang ating mga mangingisdang Pilipino and then even telling them to leave the area. But the Filipino fishermen, as I said, because of President Bongbong Marcos' firm stand in standing up for rights in the West Philippine Sea, this have significantly increase the confidence of our Filipino fishermen na despite of the harassment of the Chinese Coast Guard and their radio call warning, not a single Filipino fisherman during that particular time never really backed down. They still insisted in doing their fishing operation because they believe that the government has always been supporting them.
So both my challenges from the chopper and the Chinese vessels?
Well, I don't think that the chopper challenged them, but only the Chinese Coast Guard vessel.
Was this the first time na merong maybe PLA na nagharas sa mga fishermen natin? Kasi usually boats, ships yung nanghaharas.
Well, as far as the Coast Guard is concerned, this is the first time we saw a PLA Navy helicopter harassing Filipino fishermen with such low altitude, 15 to 18 feet. But as we all know, our media friends can also attest to this. The PLA Navy helicopter has always been part of their forces in harassing the Philippine Coast Guard and even our marine scientists when we did the survey in Sandy Cay.
So how long po nag-stay doon yung chopper ng China?
It was November 27 when they did that. And then November 28, they did the same harassment again. And then after that, wala naman ang nagawa. But what is worth noting here is the presence of the Chinese Coast Guard vessels are still there.
When you say na nandun ba, nung 26, at a certain point in time,
Nung chopper,
yaring chopper.
as I said, they hover all around those small grouping of Filipino fishing boats. So there were 5 groupings nung Filipino fishing boats, and accordingly, it is estimated around 10 to 15 minutes per group ang pag-hover niya.
Sir, going back lang kami, bakit sa tingin mo, sir, mga Filipino fishermen na naman yung pinag-iinitan ng ngayon Chinese Navy, dati China Coast Guard na, why our Filipino fishermen?
I don't think na we can attribute this to the Chinese decision to harass the Filipino fishermen. I think this particular incident can be attributed to the Filipino fishermen themselves. No? Ibig sabihin, sa panahon na to, mas maraming mangingisdang Pilipino ngayon ang pumupunta dito. And I think that's primarily the reason that prompted the Chinese Coast Guard and the PLA Navy to harass the Filipino fishermen. Kasi alam naman natin sa mga nakaraang panahon, sa worry ng ating mga mangingisdang Pilipino na pumunta ditong maglayag para sa West Philippine Sea, significantly bumababa ang bilang ng ating mga mangingisda. But for this particular occasion, nakita natin na despite of the presence of the Chinese Coast Guard, despite of bad weather condition, malalaki ang alon, and yet ang mga mangingisdang Pilipino natin nangingisda pa rin dito. So I would like to give consideration then, it's primarily because they have confidence in the government. And of course, for the security forces, na meron pa rin tayong commitment na sisiguraduhin ligtas ang pangingisda ng ating mga kababayang Pilipino.
Until when po i-deploy si Manchora Aquino, sir, sa vicinity ng Rozul?
That's already operational details.
Can I ask in other news, other topics, okay na po? Sir, about the Russian submarine, can we confirm?
Well, on the part of the Philippine Coast Guard, we can confirm this information. But as to the details of the presence of this Russian submarine, I think it's better for the armed forces of the Philippines to respond to this question.
Okay. Sir, hindi siya, yung next na follow-up ko, hindi siya, I will avoid na lang siguro yung additional details. But can you tell us more na about doon sa protocol sa pagdaan ng mga ganitong uri na vessels? Especially sa EEZ natin, tama po ba yung ginawa ng submarine na nakalutang habang dumadaan? Paano po ba yun, sir?
Again, Gio, I will refer that question to the Armed Forces of the Philippines and to the Department of National Defense.
Okay.
Sir, regarding naman dun sa 3 research Chinese vessels na spotted, although it's outside the EEZ of the Philippines, but it's near the EEZ sa may Siargao. So have you monitored kung nandun pa rin sila or pumasok ba sa ating EEZ? What happened?
Well, last Saturday, we released to the media the monitoring of these 3 Chinese research vessels. And there are only 2 occasions na masasabi nating pumasok sila within the 200 nautical mile mark. And then eventually, it also left the area. No? As of this time, based on our monitoring, those 3 Chinese research vessels are still on the eastern seaboard of our country, but it's still not inside our own exclusive economic zone.
Ano kaya ginagawa nila?
Well, we can just speculate, but definitely it has something to do with marine scientific research.
But we continue to monitor.
Yes, we are constantly monitoring their presence, and we have to make sure that they're not going to enter our own exclusive economic zone.
Sir, going back dito sa harassment ng mga fishermen, I suppose that you have already reported this to the task force or the NMC. And do you think may, even if it's supposedly the DFA should answer this, but do you think meron ng protest being prepared or nag-protest na ba?
Well, as of this time, since the Philippine Coast Guard vessels just arrived today It will only be today that we're going to transmit our report to the National Task Force West Philippine Sea. And since DFA is part of the NTFWPS, it's up to them as to whatever diplomatic action that they're going to carry out. Wala. Wala eh. Wala kaming i-share. I mean, para sa akin, this is an issue that has to be responded by the Armed Forces of the Philippines.
Sir, kung wala yung usapan ng Russia, kung bawa tayo ang tatawid, makikirahan, paano protocol na? Like
Wala tayong submarine eh.
Kung meron lang, sir.
Again, it's for the Armed Forces of the Philippines to respond to that question.
So, paano natin masasabi, sir, na, for example, innocent passage ng isang vessel sa area natin?
It's for the Department of National Defense and the Armed Forces of the Philippines. Diba? Masyado kayong fascinated sa Russian submarine.
Pero sir, ano sinabi na nag-grado ba sila na makikirahan kami?
I don't know. You ask the Armed Forces.
Is it because of the background?
I don't know. Ask the Armed Forces. Ano ba? Ang topic natin dito is the fishermen. For the videos and photos, that will be forwarded by Attorney Don later today. Para sa akin, mas magandang balita ito dahil, alam mo yun, it just showed na ang mga mangingisdang Pilipino ay pumupunta sa West Philippine Sea. And it also, itong issue na to, it relates to the argument ng ilang tao na, alam mo yun, West Philippine Sea doesn't concern them. But in reality, it concerns all of us. The mere fact na yung mga mangingisdang Pilipino was able to have fish catches as many as 5,400 kilos at dadalhin din naman dito sa Nabotas at kakainin natin lahat. Ibig sabihin, it concerns everyone, no? So, on our part, for the Philippine Coast Guard, we really want to emphasize that the story about these Filipino fishermen should be amplified for ordinary Filipinos to understand na ang usapin ng West Philippine Sea concerns everybody. That when you talk about West Philippine Sea, it is also related to food security.
So, do you expect more harassments against our fishermen by these Chinese?
I would like to rephrase the question. No? I think I would positively expect that more Filipinos will be going on fishing expedition in the West Philippine Sea. And despite of the harassment or possible harassment of the Chinese Coast Guard, they would still be willing to go there with a high hope and confidence on our government that the Philippine Coast Guard, together with the Armed Forces of the Philippines and even the Bureau of Fisheries and Aquatic Resources, will ensure their safety and security. Because that has always been the commitment of the President.
How are you going to go about it? The assurance of the safety of these fishermen?
As I said, every time that we monitor a large number of Filipino fishermen, if it's not the Coast Guard, then the B4 or even the Armed Forces of the Philippines, always respond to the call of the Filipino fishermen.
Sir, what's the worst thing that could happen? I mean, beyond that.
Russian ba to?
Hindi, sir, yung sa fishermen na tayo. Pero po, sir, kung yung sa Russia.
Hindi.
Yes, sir, yung harassment na yun, di ba? It's 15 to 18 feet na yun. So what's the worst pa beyond that? Na pwede lang gawin to harass the...
Para sa akin, ang pinaka-dangerous na harassment na ganyan is that it might, alam mo yun, masira yung light material structure ng boat. It might also capsize dahil sa pag-push ng hangin ng chopper. So those are possibilities that would, definitely result to capsizing of those indigenous fishing boats.
Do we have a message to China, sir? Why ginawa nila?
Hindi ko na nga alam kung how are we going to call out the Chinese government. And we have always been reminding them to adhere to the international law and also not to harass the ordinary Filipino fishermen. Pero sabi nga ng mangingisda, nung na-interview sila, parang napagdaanan na nila lahat eh. Binangga sila, dangerous maneuver, Nagamitan na rin daw sila ng mga military grade laser and different lights. And yet, paulit-ulit naman natin itong isinasa publiko. And yet, ang mga Chinese Coast Guard are still doing the same thing. Ngayon, mas malala pa, they're now using PLA Navy helicopters to harass our Filipino fishermen. Basahin ko yung question. Yung unang reklamo ng mga mangingisda from Quezon, Palawan ay totoo. Pero bakit parang pinatahimik po yung tao? Ayaw na makipag-usap sa media. Muli pong napatunayan ang walang katapusan na harassment ng Chinese Coast Guard at PLA kahit sa mangingisda. Ano po ang aasahan ng mga mangingisda sa Philippine Coast Guard? Romy Luzares from DYPR, Palawan. Well, una sa lahat, we never silence anybody. It's not the Philippine Coast Guard's job to inform any Filipino fishermen to refrain from talking to the media. This is primarily the reason kung bakit ang ating mga mangingisdang Pilipino can even upload photos and videos so nakaraang October, right? So on our part, we have been supportive of the transparency efforts in the West Philippine Sea. Secondly, for the question, ano ang assurance ng Coast Guard? We may have very limited number of vessels deployed in the West Philippine Sea, but because of our synchronized deployment with that of the Armed Forces of the Philippines and the Bureau of Fisheries and Aquatic Resources, we are committed to maintain our presence in the West Philippine Sea. Our current assets may not be enough to be there 24/7, but the Philippine Coast Guard, as you are all aware and can attest to this, have always been taking up the challenge. Lagi tayo nagpupunta dyan despite of the bad weather condition. It may not be perfect for us na palaging nandoon, but as far as the Coast Guard assets are concerned, we have always been utilizing our assets every time that these vessels are deployed in Palawan.
Sir, ilang barko po nagbabantay po ngayon sa Escoda Shoal after po nung BRP Teresa Magbano? Tsaka may chance po ba na bumalik po ulit sila dun sa dating deployment?
Right now, if you're going to ask me kung meron talagang stationed na barko ng China ba dito sa Escoda Shoal, right now there are no stationed vessel dito sa Escoda Shoal. Just like before, napapasok at nadadaanan din ito ng mga mangingisdang Pilipino. And for the Philippine Coast Guard vessel, we pass through Escoda on our way to Rozul Reef. So there are no stationary vessels in Escoda Shoal right now. Yes, sir. Bakit wala tayong stationary vessel? Well, first of all, ang Philippine Coast Guard vessel natin ngayon sa Palawan ay dadalawa lamang. One is the 9702 and the other one is 4411. If we're going to waste ang, put on station ang 9702 natin sa Escoda Shoal lamang, and in those instances na kailangan natin mag-deploy ng barko to support the rotation of the supply, for example, and even the resupply operation of the Coast Guard in our own deployed personnel in different maritime features, hindi enough ang 4411 na gawin lamang ito mag-isa. That's why with the scarcity of vessels, we have to strategize the effective and efficient deployment of our Coast Guard vessels.